Thank you for joining me, David Horowitz.
My pleasure.
Icon of the conservative movement, and very kindly have invited me down to your restoration weekend here in Palm Beach. It's not the best weather it's ever been for restoration weekend, but the venue is...
we had hail one year.
Did you really? Okay, well, it's definitely not the best. But it's beautiful down here. You have assembled, as you always do, the creme de la creme of the counter-resistance, of the anti...
It's like a boot camp for the war.
You say, I read once that you don't like to call the David Horowitz Freedom Center a think tank, you call it a battle tank.
Battle tank. Well, I was raised by communists to fight.
Right.
And I was frustrated for a long time on the right because nobody wanted to fight. And people like you came along, and it's changed.
It's starting to get a little better. Well, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the... Not quite as far back as that, but start with Berkeley in the 60s. You're one of the few people alive in the conservative movement now who not just remembers that time but was active in it. Most people by now know your story. They know that you began on one side and then drifted over to the other, and you're now a standard bearer for freedom and freedom of expression and whatnot. But when you began and you were active on campus in the 1960s, doing grad studies at Berkeley, right? The atmosphere there was, let's say, excitable. The atmosphere today on college campuses is a little different. Can you describe these two moments of intense...
Well, it was more an age of innocence, really. We had demonstrations. I gave a speech. I was once hauled in by the Dean's Committee because I didn't ask for a permit.
This on Sproul Plaza.
They said, oh, there might be a riot. I said, I thought they were nuts. But the first half of the 60s was a fairly innocent period. I always wanted to hear what my opponents had to say because it would make me a better radical. 60s went really dark after the Vietnam War started, and people... I mean, basically, what it was basically draft dodgers. That's what of course, they were anti-American also. They wanted us to lose, the left wanted us to lose the Vietnam War. But it got violent in the second half of the decade. But even then, it's nothing like what's going on now.
How would you describe the difference in atmosphere between just being on campus in the 60s versus...
Well, I cannot visit a campus without a bodyguard.
Because you were speaking recently.
I couldn't go to Berkeley the last time we were supposed to.
We tried our best, and we eventually had me and Pam and Mike Cernovich, the last remaining, because
no microphones and no security, and and the universities are colluding. Here's what's happened. I just came out with a book called The Left in the University, which is really dispatches from this battlefront over the last 30 years. The left, first they purged conservatives from the faculties by hiring only their own. Then they purged conservative books from the reading lists so that a student can go through 4 years of a liberal arts college, never encounter a conservative adult, or read a book by a conservative who hasn't been dead for 100 years. Then they changed the curriculum. So, I mean, a conservative couldn't be in women's studies because it's not a study of women. It's about a training in feminist Marxist claptrap.
Structurally does not allow for conservative opinions.
Exactly right.
This is the same thing they've done in journalism, precluding certain kinds of expression.
What they really did was revert our colleges to their 19th century, their origins actually from the 17th century when Harvard was created. All the collegiate institutions then were religious schools. They were doctrinal. They taught the doctrines of Methodists or Presbyterians or Catholics, and they trained priests and ministers. And that's what the left has succeeded in doing. These are religious institutions, and that's, if you have a scientific institution, which is what the modern research university was in the 20th century, then you want to hear two sides, if there's a dissenting opinion, and you compare the evidence. But now, if you have a religious institution, which is what Berkeley is today, then the dissenting opinion isn't a dissent. It's a heresy.
Yeah.
And you burn them at the stake if
Cancel their free speech week. Take their money. Take their money and don't give them their venues.
It's horrific. It's horrifying. They have destroyed our liberal arts colleges.
It's been observed by some people when you remove religion from the equation, whether it's in university or in public life, you don't just remove religion. You make the space for something worse to take its place. And that today is social justice.
There's two kinds of religions. There's a religion that says the world is a really messed up place, fallen. But on the other side, there's a divinity who's going to sort it out for us. That, in my book, that's okay. These people aren't dangerous. Then there's the religion of social justice, which says the world is a messed up place, and if you give us enough power, or we can acquire it,
we can fix it here on earth.
We will create heaven on earth. These people are dangerous.
And that actually is a character.
That's why communists killed so many people. 100 million people died.
That's a function. It's a feature of communism. Is the arrogance, the audaciousness of believing that you can create a heaven on earth. It has that in common with social justice, and also
social justice is communism. The more beautiful the dream of social justice or communism, heaven on earth, the greater the crime you will commit or support. And the greater the lie, what lie would you not tell to create heaven?
To create heaven on earth, exactly. And this is what makes room.
This explains the Democratic Party today.
And also the sort of virtue signaling and the hypocrisy of Hollywood. I made a joke once. A few weeks ago, I said something like, if somebody describes themselves as a male feminist, you can start the clock on the rape charge. Because this is, they're aiming for this incredible utopia, so they'll excuse whatever bad behavior they have.
Right. Well, that's how Harvey Weinstein got as far as he got.
Right. And
because he's giving money to the cause of redeeming the
world. This is the puritanical instinct. It is whatever I personally may do to oppress or immiserate someone else, I'm fighting for a higher cause. Yeah, and you remove something as I would say benevolent as Christianity and replace it with something as unpleasant as communism or social justice or whatever.
I was part of a group that put out one of the first, there was really the first magazine of the New Left. It's called Root and Branch. Right. And in it, I believe, is an article by Robert Scheer, who has remained a brain-dead leftist ever since. But this was wise what he said. He said, inside every revolutionary lurks a Puritan.
Right, because and I think you had something like that, or maybe you still do have a front page, right?
On front page,
you've spiced it up a little.
Inside every progressive is a totalitarian screaming to get out.
You've ramped it up a little bit because our changing times call for a higher level of rhetoric.
I love these people, we're on the right side of history. Like history is becoming more and more enlightened. Yeah. Things are a lot worse than they were 50 years ago in this country.
Let me ask you how it is that so many young people can become susceptible to this stuff. I mean, it's
easy. Young people are stupid. They have no life experience. You get seduced by these wonderful ideas. Oh, we can do it better than our parents did.
But there's something different, isn't there, about the millennial generation? Because, I mean, many generations prior to that have gone through this cycle of being liberal when they're younger and getting conservative as they get older, when they have kids, all the rest of it. Millennials are not doing that. Millennials are staying crazy. Like my age, people who are 35 years old, they're still crazy.
Our educational system has been destroyed by the left. So they're completely miseducated. They don't know anything. They don't know about communism. They don't
And that perhaps explains why, despite the fact that their life is better than it has ever been before, they seem to think it's worse.
Yeah, well, if you give people something, they don't appreciate it.
Right.
That's why legal immigration is good, because immigrants appreciate them.
Well, you hear all these great stories, don't you? People coming from communist dictatorships and writing for Commentary magazine about, what is America? What are you guys talking about? This is crazy. Well, you now, I think, have moved into what I call your late period, where you seem to,
it is late.
Well, no, what I mean is you've moved into a sort of mature set of positions and a kind of indefatigability and a sort of ballsiness that a lot of public intellectuals are worried about doing...
Yeah, I've been called every name in the book.
Right, but you've been forced into this position where now you just say what you really think.
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
But this, I think, is why you and I have always got on, because maybe I reached this position earlier in life where, very early, I mean, within a year...
You have no idea how young you are.
Within a year of being politically active, suddenly I'm and this is remarkable to me, I'll tell you. I know that you have many friends from all over the world, but coming from a nice family with a good education, being brought up in a newsroom in London, in the Telegraph, which is it's quite a genteel sort of place, and you come to America, you realize how savage the culture wars are over here, and just expressing reasonable, respectable points of view and telling a few jokes along the way and being provocative and obnoxious and whatever. Suddenly you're an anti-Semite, a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, a transphobe,
a pedophile.
But it's it was extraordinary to me coming over from.
I meant that about me.
Oh, you too?
I tweeted. Well, there's this political assassination going on of Roy Moore by the left.
Right.
That's 38 years ago. Now we have guilt by accusation. I don't like Moore particularly, but there's this political assassination. We have to rally around him the way the Democrats do when they're a target. And so they said I was first a supporter of. He isn't technically even a pedophile. A pedophile is pre-adolescent.
Yeah.
And then the hypocrisy of these progressives. Anthony Weiner admitted that he was a sexual predator, and he had to go, and then he runs for mayor of New York as a sexual predator. The whole Democratic Party supports him.
Yeah. This is a function of the moral collapse of Hollywood, the collapsing of its moral foundations.
Of the political left generally.
And of the political left generally. And it's remarkable, these people sort of exist in intricate symbiosis, supporting each other, protecting each other, making each other mutually powerful and untouchable.
I'm so enjoying their misery.
Isn't it great? So
I've seen leftists who are accused of sexual harassment for nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm just enjoying it.
I almost don't care.
I'm not going to stick my neck out to rescue you.
Look, we can, in our most high-minded moments, admit that, of course, we believe in due process, and we do believe in due process. It's a cornerstone of the legal system and all the rest of it. But you can't deny how delicious it is that progressives, who have for 30 years destroyed conservatives' reputations on the basis of mere allegations, are finally getting a taste of their own medicine with tools they themselves created. Exactly. I'm almost starting to like BuzzFeed again, because they just don't care anymore. They don't care anymore. They're just like, you know what, we invented this, and it's going to take out everyone we love, and it's eventually going to kill us, but we're just going to go for it.
They believe it's virtuous.
But
it's called being hoist on your own petard.
Right, which I learned recently is a kind of bomb. I should have known that from Hamlet, but I messed up in another interview, and I had a very angry commenter saying, "How do you not know this? You're English." It's a kind of bomb. No, it's absolutely delicious, and it is very hard not to just sit back and laugh, because they had it coming. They deserve this, Yeah. And sure.
I saw Megyn Kelly interviewing a congressional staffer who claimed to have been sexually harassed, abused, molested, and what was the incident? Her boss, she was on a communications staff, bumped into her at a bus stop and said, "You're really hot looking." They are making women toxic. I am so glad I'm not 18 or 20.
Well, this is the only national controversy I'm relatively sure I can't be dragged into. I mean, this is the only thing they can't get me on. There is a serious side to this, though, and it is that feminism always hurts women the most. Feminism always sets women back.
Feminism is cancer, I heard somebody.
Somebody once said that, bravely. But this is, I mean, to give you an example from tech, which is...
Recklessly.
Recklessly, maybe, yeah. To give you an example from tech, which is an area I know a little bit about. So Linus Torvalds is the inventor of Linux, which is ultimately the great-great-great-great-grandfather of the software that runs your iPhone, right? And he now will not be in a room alone with a woman for any reason whatsoever, because he's worried that these feminist activist groups, who have admitted that they deliberately send people out on entrapment missions, on honey traps, to try to take out prominent men in tech, to make a political point, and they're perfectly happy to admit that they're just taking scalps, whether people deserve it or not, to make a point about women in tech. He now won't spend time with women privately.
Nazis.
Of course, but who does that hurt? Who does this situation hurt? It doesn't hurt Linus Torvalds, because Linus Torvalds has made it. The people it does hurt are women who want to be mentored by him, women who might want to be employed by him. I mean, what's the obvious consequence if you're a
They don't think in terms of practical consequences.
Right.
It's a religion. It makes them feel righteous and noble.
But it's like, if I was, this is why so few women like feminism anymore. I mean, as in American statistics, fewer than 1 in 5 women now will describe themselves as a
feminist. If I was in college today, I wouldn't go near a woman. I mean, they haul you into a kangaroo court, and, you know.
Because you touched a boob. You know,
well, I wouldn't even do that.
In previous generations, where a woman would just turn around and say, "Keep your effing hands to yourself, or I'll get my dad to beat you up."
How difficult is that?
So, but the problem is that women suffer from this because in ways they will never even know, because they're not given opportunities, because men are too worried about X, Y, Z. You know, they're hired into positions where they're, you know, whether it's marketing positions or whatever, where they're, or HR, which is already primarily staffed by women, where the risk of sexual harassment lawsuits is low, and they're not put into predominantly male teams like computer developers or whatever, perpetuating what they in the first place say is this terrible indignity and injustice visited upon women. It hurts them the most. Another group in America that, you know...
Well, hear me roar. Women are not oppressed. Women are incredibly powerful.
I mean, white middle-class women in America must be the most privileged group since the history of the human civilization. Like, since there has been human society, since you know, the first progressive started sorting people into skin color, sexuality, and gender.
If you're a hot-looking woman, you can turn that into cash. Well, but you can also use it to ruin a guy's career.
You know, I always used to say, because I was a tech reporter as well, this is coming from before I did any of this stuff, and all this women in tech stuff was bubbling up. This is how I got into the culture wars, because there was this world being described that I didn't recognize from my reporting experience. And female entrepreneurs were telling me, are you kidding? It's the best thing imaginable, because if I can hold my own against the guys, I get more press coverage. Everyone shuts up when I walk in the room. They want to hear what I have to say. I'm like a unicorn. It's the best competitive advantage for my business imaginable. Being a woman in a male-dominated industry.
It's the same with any left-wing designated minority.
If you got it and you're ready to bring it.
Males are the minority.
Well, in higher education, certainly.
Harvey greeted me. He held me down on the bed. He then orally forced himself on me.
Harvey walked in, took his pants down, exited on the floor.
Actor Kevin Spacey has sexually assaulted my son.
Louis C.K. approached her when she was working on a TV pilot. He said, "Can I masturbate in front of you?"
Stuck his hand inside my
Sylvester
son's
Stallone
pants.
is facing some serious allegations
Six
that
women
he
have
sexually
come
assaulted
forward,
a teenager.
accusing Brett Ratner of
followed me
sexual
to my car,
harassment.
and
Kevin
I saw,
Spacey
you know,
is facing
started to
20
cry.
new allegations.
My name is Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm a New York Times best-selling author and an award-winning journalist. I'm also a victim of child sexual abuse, and in the 2000s I lived in Beverly Hills, where I saw things that made me want to move out of Hollywood really very quickly. In my new book, Despicable, I'm not just lifting the lid on what I saw, but I'm also telling the stories of friends of mine who work in the entertainment and music business. People who don't want to go to the mainstream media or to left-wing journalists because they felt so consistently vilified and ostracized for their political views. These people are ready to name names. In Despicable, I explain how Hollywood and the Democrat Party exist in intricate symbiosis, keeping each other protected and powerful. But I also explain how Hollywood's recent string of commercial failures and creative disasters stem from the same cancerous center as its hypocrisy and finger-wagging. The collapse in Hollywood's moral foundation has led us to a place that tells the rest of us how to live while turning a blind eye to the most appalling abuses on its own doorstep. Whether this ossified and self-regarding industry can find a way out of the crisis it created depends on whether Hollywood can discover an appreciation for the only kind of diversity that actually matters: diversity of thought and opinion. Despicable will be published next year, but you can pre-order signed first editions at dangerous.com today. one thing I wanted to ask you about, because you've had such a, you've been active for so long and have such deep, excellent knowledge of American society and the ebbs and flows of different social movements. Historically, there have been moral panics, mainly propagated by the media, about things like climate change, acid rain, satanic ritual abuse. It occurs to DDT in the crops. It occurs to me that the panic about this supposed outbreak of white supremacy in the United States and anti-Semitism is a similar kind of moral panic, cooked up by journalists
that's
who wish it
the
were
kind way of looking at it.
Okay.
Anybody who uses the phrase white supremacy to describe America needs to be in a loony bin.
Right.
This is so detached from any reality. This is the most tolerant, inclusive country in the world. Certainly with large minority populations. You know, it's just the escalation of the term racist to be applied to anybody who disagrees with you if you're a leftist.
But it is a fever pitch in a way that racism was always used as an element in their toolkit to scare people and to intimidate. But this is now a full-scale moral panic.
The left is malignant. Yeah, but there's panic is something that overcomes you and you can't control it. They work themselves into the panic because it's very, well, it's not going to be effective anymore. They've run out their string on this. I mean, who could take white supremacy seriously except a CNN anchor?
I think it's true. It's interesting when allegations are thrown at people like Steve Bannon, who's speaking at the weekend, this weekend, Donald Trump, all of us really. People who've done nothing ever to indicate that we even are slightly prejudicial on the basis of any personal characteristic. To say that...
do you know that the Ku Klux Klan in the 20s had 11 senators, 75 congressmen, and I don't know how many, and 2 million members. Yeah. Now, there's not a one.
Like 400 of them or something.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, if there's 5,000 in a country of 300 million.
Who cares, And Richard Spencer this guy Richard, well, of course, but this guy Richard Spencer, the best he can do is marshal like 1,000 people. After months of planning.
Black Lives Matter, they can get tens of thousands to go out in the streets, break the law, burn cities down, kill cops.
What was it? Was it in Chicago where that guy the Asian doctor or something came out and they misunderstood and they thought it was a white supremacist protest and 40,000 people came out?
No, it was San Francisco.
San Francisco, is that something?
No, it was better than that. He was a Japanese American and identified as a person of color. Yeah. And 6 of the 7 speakers were so-called persons of color. Yeah. And
it's like a free speech rally.
Called off the demonstration because of the reaction. The left, they got 40,000 people to protest nothing.
To protest a Japanese American talking about free speech.
So you want to know where is the threat of violence? It's all on the left. Where's the Jew hatred? It's all on the left. Fascism. Yeah. That's what they are.
I have my own thoughts on this, but tell me your insights into why the left has such a love affair with Islam and hates Christianity so much.
Because they're people of color. I mean, go into my.
You think it is a skin color thing?
People of color, well, they hate America. The left has supported every enemy of America that we have been at war with since 1945. Every last one, the left identified with our enemies that were killing us. So why wouldn't they be sympathetic to Islam, Islamic?
Because there's a sort of unholy alliance, isn't there, between
I wrote a book called that in 2004. Actually, I'm always.
See, I'm trying to tee you up here with you, so you can.
Ahead of the curve is not a good place to be. But yeah, people of color. There is no such thing. First of all, it's not English. This term. We don't say here's a box of crayons of color, do we? Or a television of color. It's the way French people talk, du couleur. So what is its function? Its function is to divide the world into people of color and who are oppressed and the bad people who are the oppressors. Yes. And this is whites.
This is Marxism mapped onto skin color, mapped onto social issues.
I mean, if you think that people of color have a common interest, think of the Rwandans.
You know that, because I can speak a little to this.
Or
like
Pakistanis in India.
It's like LGBT, right? This leftist group, this glob of people who hate each other, who who have a lobby, and the lobbies are always run by one of the L, the G, the B, or the T at any one time. Because they can't stand each other, so they can only advocate for one of their interests at once. So it's gay men in the '60s with Stonewall. Then it becomes in the '80s, '90s, and the 2000s, lesbians run everything, and now it's the trans lobby because they have to take turns because they hate each other and they don't want to be in the same room as one another. I mean, gay men and lesbians can't stand each other.
Talk about your 1%ers.
Right? It's like everybody has to have a turn running the gay movement because they actually have nothing in common, and in many cases what they're advocating for is directly against the interests of one of the other ones in the group. But this is the root of intersectionality, right?
The
This
only
is the start
satisfaction I get is thinking about the left amongst themselves.
Oh, well, no, it's wonderful. Just daydreaming about what happens in the Stonewall board meetings when the disabled Muslim transgender advocate is runs up against a white gay guy, or it's great. It's absolutely great. I do want to ask you just on some gender stuff briefly. Obviously, the left's love affair with any body, any group, any nation, any movement that hates America is now well established. This unholy alliance that's
been going on, since 1917.
Right. Set aside the hypocrisy, I guess, and just look at the fact, the feminists mollycoddling and pandering to radical Islam, an ideology that would destroy every great advance for women if it were given the chance.
Hang all gays.
Yeah, I mean, to say nothing of the gays they love so much, unless of course we vote Republican or have the wrong opinions about something, in which case.
Or there are gays demonstrating in Israel for gay pride.
Right, right. I mean, it's too much for them to handle. But the idea of rape culture that sprung up on college campuses is another outgrowth of this cultural Marxism, of Marxism applied to social issues, applied to gender, skin color, all the rest of it. Now, people like Christine Hoff Sommers, and I talked about this on my last college tour, have demonstrated the absurdity of this with numbers. It's like if 1 in 4 women were truly being raped on college campuses, it would be like the Congo.
Rape has been defined down, so it's nothing.
So now it's kind of like looking at you for a bit too long or something.
You're hot looking. I just raped you.
Yeah. So now it's sexual assault or whatever. I guess this ties into a question earlier. I mean, it's not just young people. Now adults are believing, or at least professing to believe, stuff that they must know isn't true.
Oh, because people are afraid. It's not true, but if you say that, the price is way too high. Especially in the atmosphere we have now. I mean, this guilt by accusation. There was a time in this country during the McCarthy 50s when the left was upset about guilt by accusation, guilt by association.
Right.
Now it's what they.
But do you think it's going to get better? Because Hollywood now is reaping what it has sown.
The thing that you can count on the left for is never to know when to stop. So they're going to go on and on until they run into a wall.
Los Angeles is just a crater, a smoldering crater. It's But I mean, with what's happening in Hollywood at the moment, and it's billowing out, and yeah, fine, we've got the Roy Moore thing, but let's be honest, by and large, almost wholly, this is virtue signaling liberals who lo and behold, like nobody could have guessed this, end up having these ugly, dirty, secret lives, or end up being guilty of precisely the things that they are finger-wagging to the rest of us about. This has got to have a consequence with the public. This has got to have a consequence with ordinary Americans. Because ordinary Americans are watching this and saying, everything I thought that I knew about Hollywood, that they were out of touch, elitist hypocrites.
Degenerate.
Right.
Excuse me for the term, but it sounds so old-fashioned.
Right.
But what this guy did is degenerate.
But this word
and the support of him is also degenerate.
What do you think about how sexless the liberal sex scandals are? Because I can't help but think, like, if it was a real sex scandal, a real sex scandal, there would have been like lots of forcible, real horrible stuff that people don't like talking about. But all of these, like Wiener's just sexting. Weinstein's like off into a plant pot. There's not much sex in these liberal sex scandals, is there?
Well, we'll see about Weinstein. I'm not sure.
But you know what I mean, though, right? It's just there's a lot of this
it used to be
adolescent diddling.
It's interesting because I remember when it was England that was the capital of
sleaze and sex, yeah.
Sex scandals.
The MPs with hookers and all the rest of it in the 90s.
And in America, the scandals were all about money.
Right.
Washington scandal.
Well, at least when it was conservative politicians, they were actually having sex and they were actually doing drugs. It was like coke and hooker orgies in, you know, at the Corinthia or whatever. You know, they were actually doing this stuff.
I don't care if it's among consenting adults. But, you know, what's the consent level? I'm thinking I cannot. I used to like Lise Wheel, who was the, you know, on the O'Reilly factory, he had the legal team. And she's a lawyer. And she claims to have been sexually harassed by O'Reilly for 15 years. When does it become a deal?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I don't think there are any virtuous players.
They wait 10 years, they rise.
After having been paid, they're rich and they're famous.
They trade sex for careers and, you know, and monetary rewards. I mean, how's that different from hooking?
People don't like it when I say this, but Rose McGowan appears to me to be enjoying this a little bit too much. And if you look at the crowing...
It's revenge. This is just, you know, this is all revenge.
You know, you take money to stay quiet.
I took it. I kept my mouth shut while Harvey Weinstein did his number on all these other young women. Yeah. I got my stardom. I know it's her. I'm thinking of Ashley Judd. And then suddenly, I'm a feminist hero. Come on.
Yeah. And it's a calculus. So just to show how cold and sociopathic this is, it's almost like they've worked out the precise moment when it is more professionally advantageous to speak out than to stay quiet, and struck then. You know, and then there's sort of like, you know.
Well, all it takes is one story. I mean, it was the New York Times story that did it. Yeah. Okay, the New York Times did it. Now I can unload.
Right, and because now it's safe for me to do so. Okay, yeah. And Rose, the worst bit of this whole story for me, the most damning detail in all of it to come out wasn't about any of the men. It was the fact that Rose McGowan was considering a 7-figure settlement to stay quiet again.
Of course,
but
it's deals. And when you give it a pass, you encourage it.
But it's so messed up. I'm just sitting there watching these people peacocking.
People are messed up. I mean, you can't. This is just the human condition. What drives us up the wall is their self-righteousness.
I grew up on a farm in England. This stuff is crazy to me. Like, how she's talking about taking 4 or 5 million for it to stay quiet again, and she's still a feminist hero. And I'm just like, I'm just a regular person sitting at home with my jaw on the floor and my eyes like rolling into the back of my head, and I don't get how
it's the old joke of we're just haggling over the price.
Right. It's incredible to me. You named to move on to a more recent era. You run now Front Page magazine, which is your one of your front lines of attack.
It is my main website. Yeah.
Right, and you named Steve Bannon the Person of the Year. Other places went with the obvious choice with Trump and all the rest of it. It was the only publication I saw that did that, certainly the first one. Why did you do that?
Well, look, I'm a big fan of Trump because he's a fighter. He fights back. If we had 100 Trumps, we could really change this country. But when Bannon came into that campaign, Trump was like 16 points behind. And you know, Bannon turned the campaign around. And now, I don't remember if he was doing this when we named him, but going outside and organizing the people's army, as it were, that is a hugely important mission he's on. And I think that the creation that Breitbart is just a major achievement. You know, it is. You go to Breitbart, you see exactly where the war is, you see how to fight it. It's just a great, and it's so huge. It's really made a tremendous impact. And also the people who picked, you know, Trump as Man of the Year. I mean, that time it had Hitler as Man of the Year, or you know, Stalin as whatever. It's just they're big news.
Well, I mean, you picked
And
it. You actually tried to pick the man of the year.
I've never cured myself of, you know, the way I was brought up, my leftism. I'm always looking to be in the vanguard.
Yeah.
And Bannon
but this is what
vanguard.
Breitbart and Bannon have in common with you, and in your, I think it might be the book before last, where you quote Mike Tyson. And you're saying, and you're saying, you want to start every conversation with the leftists by punching them in the mouth, and it's that kind of.
Everybody has a game plan until you punch them in the mouth.
Yeah.
And the left they're always punching conservatives in the mouth with racist, white supremacist, and so forth. So, I just want to see conservatives use those words against the left.
Well, what I think it showed, to bring us back to where we started, is that your journey from the front lines of the left to the front lines of the right has given you a sort of unique, instinctive understanding of how to win that the vast majority of conservatives simply don't have. They don't possess it.
It's called go for the jugular.
Right. And I think it's what people admire about you so much.
The Democratic Party is a racist party. I'm waiting for the Republican who will say that. They control every major inner city in America 100% and have for 50 to 100 years. Every killing field, Chicago, Detroit, Ferguson, St. Louis, Baltimore, all of them 100% controlled by the Democratic Party. Every failing school system, every injustice, every oppression that poor blacks and Hispanics experience in this country, Democrats are 100% responsible for. And Republicans are too tongue-tied ever to mention it.
Yeah. It's
not to mention identity politics, which is racism.
Yes. I feel like the conservative movement's caught up to you after maybe a couple of decades, and now I think you're enjoying a renaissance in the Trump era when conservatives are showing up, actually willing to fight, and that's why so many of them are looking to you. I think.
I felt like a voice crying into the wilderness until.
But you're not now.
Until there was this. Tea Party was formed. Obama did a lot of this, but the Tea Party was formed, and suddenly there were 100,000 conservatives marching on Washington. Until that moment, you wouldn't find 3 conservatives marching down a street. They'd look at each other and say, "What are we, collectivists?"
Yeah, this is awkward, But it's a constitutional thing, isn't it?
Things have changed, and then there's this whole younger generation, yourself included, of conservatives who are really aggressive fighters, and they're cleverer about it than I am. I'm kind of like a sledgehammer. But I love these people who put up this poster in Harvard Square saying it's okay to be white.
It's so great.
Incited. The left immediately reacts, and they show their true colors. They're racist.
But this is wonderful. This started on 4chan, this thing, and then I leapt on this too. But it's a perfect example of saying something completely uncontroversial. Like, you don't need to hate yourself for what you were born
part
as.
of their thing. We're supposed to be inclusive, right? It just explodes that lie.
And it wasn't white pride. It wasn't white nationalism. It was, it's okay. It's the most milquetoast, lukewarm, imaginable endorsement. It's okay to be white. And it's in this lovely, elegant, thin font. Just I thought it is the most unthreatening, the most non-confrontational,
unless you're a leftist,
imaginable statement phrased and presented in the most uncontroversial and non-confrontational way possible, and they lost their minds.
Yes, of course.
It was beautiful. It was very beautiful.
They understand. They understand.
Because they knew what we were getting at.
Yeah, you are racist.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. And you have taken an interest in me since I appeared.
Since I first saw you.
Since I appeared in this insane country. It's wonderful. It's the best country, but it is crazy. And I'm grateful to you for everything. But it's also been lovely for me to watch somebody who I'm very fond of and have great affection for suddenly getting the dues you deserve, because now everybody, I think, is realizing, everybody, as I say, is catching up to you. So anyway, thank you so much.
For the country.
No, absolutely. And congratulations on another great success this weekend.
Thank
you so much.
Hey, Milo.